Everybody, and welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you were first trying to learn about it, so this is what this show is for. This is the place where you can ask all of your questions about politics without any kind of fear of ridicule or roasting or debating. This is not a show for fighting. This is not a show for arguing. This is not a show for debating. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. And the world of politics is extremely confusing these days. There's a lot of misinformation and propaganda out there. It can be difficult to figure out what are good sources, what are reliable sources, and as most people are getting their news about the government over social media. That is just it's the Wild West out here. So it can be difficult to parse what's really going on, and it can be confusing, especially if like me, didn't really focus on learning how the government worked when you were in high school. And so, I am here to answer all of those questions for you. Maybe you are somebody on the right who has a question for people on the left. Maybe there are certain questions you don't feel comfortable asking your friends in real life because you're worried that it would paint you in a certain light. Maybe you live in a place where you can't ask certain questions because it might make you look like a MAGA person, or you live in some place where you can't ask certain questions because it would paint you as a libtard cuck. Well, there's no judgments here, and this is not one of those shows where I yell at people. So all those debate shows where people yell at each other and they try to own each other, and there's a lot of yelling and screaming and calling each other stupid, and then we get to clip it and put it on our social media under the handle of Democrat owns MAGA person. That's not what happens here. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Billy Bob Jack says, guilty no matter what we say. I don't know what that means, Billy Bob Jack. So, yeah, if you got any questions about politics, just put them in the chat and I'll do my best to give you a great answer. There's no such thing as a dumb question. I don't believe in making people feel stupid or ashamed for trying to learn new things, even if, the Filthy Rich Baller says, how does lobbying work? So, there are these kind of like legal mechanisms by which people can buy access to certain politicians. So let's say that you are a wildly profitable company like ExxonMobil, and you want the government to pass legislation that says that greenhouse gases are no longer safe, are no longer unsafe, that greenhouse gases are the safest thing, that everybody should be breathing in carbon dioxide because it's better. So what you would do is you would like write your own piece of legislation, and you would say to whatever government official, like, it would be really great if you would pass this sort of thing, and then you buy them meals and you pledge to donate to their campaigns and to their super PACs and stuff like that. And then after making those pledges, then you kind of like buy time and access to those politicians, and then they, because they have been influenced by your campaign donations and you're spending time with them, they more often than not will pass the thing that you just handed them over. Let's see here. Somebody with no screen name says, what side, blue or red? I'm a Democrat. Uncle Keith says, Trump or Kamala? What a weird question. The campaign's over, man. Election's over. Trump won. Somebody forgot to unplug one of the bots in Russia. Mia's LV Adventure says, good morning. Good morning, Mia. And welcome to the live stream, everybody. My name is Jared, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics. So if you got any questions about politics, just put them in the chat. Uncle Keith says, like, who'd you vote for, dude? Oh, Democrats, up and down the ballot. So yeah, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There's no roasting. There's no debating. Don Lanen says, he is so slanted. No, I'm not. I mean, if you think that the truth is biased, then maybe that's where the disconnect is happening. Let's see here. Uncle Keith says, do you like crackers? Are you talking about like oyster crackers, like that you put in clam chowder and stuff like that? Or are you talking about like a derogatory term for white people? Don Lannon says, you don't talk truth. Almost everything that I say is 100% true. The things that I say that aren't 100% true are my opinion. I will always tell you when it's my opinion. And you haven't pointed out anything that I haven't said that's accurate. And Uncle Keith, yeah, white people are fine, I guess. I don't really care for any race of people over any other race of people, and I don't really dislike any race of people. Turkey on Stilts says, what action can we take? Can we actually take to make sure the fascists don't win? Turkey on stilts. That's an excellent question. I would recommend checking out my Discord. I have a thread posted called The Work, and that is all the things that people like you and me can do to make sure that the fascists don't win. I'll give you just like a little taste of it right here. It's important that we talk to people in real life because the internet is the Wild West and it's been captured by the billionaire class to spread their favored propaganda narratives. So we got to make sure that our friends and our family and our neighbors and our coworkers aren't stuck in any sort of right-wing propaganda rabbit holes. We need to put political pressure on our elected representatives by calling their offices and visiting their offices and hounding them when they try to go out to eat lunch and dinner. We need to boycott and strike and protest. And most importantly, we got to vote. There are more people that don't vote in this country than people that vote. And so we got to find those people. We got to convince them to vote. And we got to convince them to vote for better politicians. Don says, get a life. Just trying to get me to fight, Don. That's not what you're supposed to do here. Paul Willis says there are two elite classes, old and new money. Yeah, that is accurate. Christian Cage's my dad says Zoran Mamdani has said some unconstitutional things and hasn't been questioned on it. What do you believe Zoran Mamdani has said that are unconstitutional, Christian? Paul Willis says old money is leftist. That is inaccurate, Paul. The billionaire class, regardless of if it is old money or new money, is firmly in the camp of the right wing in this country, and I will happily give you more details on that, Paul, if you like. Messa stresses, I hear Democrats and Republicans, but who or what are libertarians? Libertarians generally believe in just dismantling the government. So they don't believe there should be an IRS. They don't believe that there should be, abortion bans. They don't believe in government regulations. They just believe that the free market will take care of everything. And it doesn't really work everywhere that they've tried libertarianism. Those towns have gotten taken over by bears and shit. Kale, good to see you again. Who do you think was the last Republican leader who truly cared for and made a difference in the U.S.? Probably John McCain, I think. Jerry Manders says, how would you like to be hounded while eating dinner? Well, I'm not an elected representative. So if I was taking people's health care away and I was increasing people's taxes so that I could give more tax breaks to the billionaire class, then I would deserve getting hounded while eating. South Fort Greg says, do you think the housing market will ever change, or is it forever ruined for generations to come? The housing market isn't going to change by itself. We have to vote for the kind of politicians that will incentivize the housing market to be better, and having stupid bullshit tariffs on Canadian lumber and aluminum and steel coming in from other countries is doing nothing to increase building supply, and deporting all of the construction workers, even if they are legal residents, even if they are citizens or veterans with zero criminal record, is not doing anything to increase housing supply. Let's see here. It's All Theater says, how much money do you think Gavin Newsom has swindled through backdoor deals for himself? I haven't seen any evidence that he has done that. It's All Theater. Justin says, what proof of that claim do you have? Which claim are you referring to? Nussmeyer for Heisman says, how much do you think the government controls the political events to keep us distracted, divided? I think that is kind of conspiracy theory-y. What we often ascribe to being a coup or a conspiracy theory is mostly just incompetence. And so I believe that there are billionaires who are flooding our information spheres, like media and social media, with stupid bullshit to try to distract us. Like this Sydney Sweeney thing is kind of stupid bullshit to try to distract us. They try to get us to fight amongst ourselves to distract us, but I don't believe that the government is controlling political events. And H. Granite says, weird it's not foreigners building the houses in New England. I don't know what that comment means. Justin says, you've seen no proof of Gavin Newsom lining his pockets. No, I have seen no proof of that. I have seen no articles about that. I'm open to learning about it. Paul Willis says, old money is near institutionalized and does not want revolutions. They want welfare, bread, and circuses. Again, Paul Willis, I don't find any substance to the things you're saying. If you don't ask a question, I'm going to boot you. South Fork Red says, do you think RFK Jr. could possibly have our best interest in the future, or is he too far gone? RFK Jr. does not give a shit about taking care of us. He is an ideologue. He is a liar. He is a con man. He is completely full of shit. Let's see here. Rosalind, good to see you again. Nussmeyer says, you're respectful, bro. Thank you. Haven't seen this from live creators yet. Yeah, that's what I'm doing here, man. Trying to be respectful. We don't have to fight each other. We can just engage on the facts, Jordan says, how do you feel about the phone ban? I don't know what you're referring to. Justin says, Panera Bread, minimum wage, exemption, Gavin, corruption. Wait, so Panera got a an exemption to the minimum wage law, and then they paid Gavin Newsom to do that? That seems a little, you know, I'm skeptical that that's accurate, Justin, but I will do a little Google on that and see. Triska, good to see you again. Let's see here. Kyle says, is it time for the U.S. to pass another immigrant amnesty similar to the program from 1986? You know, Kale, I don't know how necessary that is. I think the most important thing that we can do, number one, is we just have to kind of put out the fire. And right now, Trump's policies, increasing ICE's budget 360%, ignoring habeas corpus, just fucking, a quota of arresting people who are just trying to fucking do their jobs at Home Depot. That's the shit we need to stop. And when we stop that, we make America's immigration system 1,000 times better just by doing that. How we build on top of that, I think first we just need to hire more immigration and asylum judges. We need to put more money into the public defenders who would be assisting with immigration. And we need to be working with South American countries to try to address the root causes of the immigration coming across the border. But also, I think we need to address the fact that America has this weird idea that immigrants are causing some problems here in America when they're not. Immigrants are a net positive on this country by a lot, especially considering that America's population is in decline because of declining birth rates. Steve's Chalk says, Forbes says Harris has 82 billionaires support her and Trump 52. Steve's Chalk. So that article I have read. People have shown that article to me as evidence that billionaires are more on the side of Democrats than Republicans. But it is pretty inaccurate to say that those data points prove that point. Because if you add those two numbers together, you don't even get to 200. And there are, I think, 1,000 billionaires just in America. So where do the rest of the billionaires go? Additionally, that article admits that they don't know how much money each of those billionaires gave. Like Harris's billionaires could have given Harris $1 each, and Trump's billionaires could have given him $1 million each. Steve, are you still here? Are you listening to the things that I'm saying? I think what's more important is to take a bird's eye view of the issue. Like, what are the points that we can look at to see exactly which side of the political spectrum is for the billionaire class, which side of the political spectrum is for the working class, and which side of the political spectrum do the billionaires mostly support. And all of the data says that the billionaire class supports the Republican Party, and the Republican Party gives massive tax breaks to the billionaire class in exchange for all that money. 75% of all billionaire donations went to the Republican Party in 2024. Donald Trump has more billionaires in his cabinet than any president in history. It is a fucking symbiotic relationship where the Republican Party cuts taxes for the billionaires, which gives them more money, so then they give Republicans money to win elections. The Republicans win elections, and then they cut taxes for billionaires even more. And then billionaires give them even more money, and then Republicans get elected, and then they cut taxes for billionaires even more. That's not what happens on the left. There is a much different relationship between political donations and the billionaire class on the left than on the right. Alrighty. User a bunch of numbers says, do you work, bro? I do. Steve's Chalk says Harris spent a lot more. That's inaccurate, Steve's Chalk. It's like you're listening to the things that I'm saying, but you're ignoring them. Justin says Newsom took cash, bailed out PG&E, benefited wife's nonprofit company. Justin, I think it's really weird that you're spending so much time trying to drag Newsom through the mud when our government just deleted habeas corpus from the Constitution on their websites, when they are consolidating power exactly like a fascist fucking regime would, when the economy is on the brink of a recession, when, the military was fucking occupying an American city. Like, where do you think the emergency is in talking about Gavin Newsom and not the shit that Donald Trump and Republicans are doing right now, currently. You know, you think it's really important that you torpedo Newsom's run for president? He hasn't fucking even won the primary yet. You know, and meanwhile, Trump is a fucking crypto coin and accepting untold numbers of billions of dollars from foreign nationals, from white supremacist groups potentially. Like, we don't fucking know. It's all dark money shit. And but you think that Newsom is the person we really need to be focusing on right now. Sus as hell, Justin. Consider yourself sus, my guy. All right, Carmine says, if you're here and you disagree, ask yourself if you're doing your best to have a productive conversation. Excellent. Let's see here. Okay, Diego Vargas says Harris got more money from small donations and Trump got $275 million from Elon. That is accurate. Republicans are up to no good too, but this was the first thing I heard you say. All right, Justin, I appreciate that. I'm not going to kick you out. Isengi says, wait, I'm not against Harris, but she didn't spend more. If you look at certain metrics, it might seem like she spent more, but there are a lot of dark money levers in political spending, thanks to things like Citizens United, where we don't necessarily know exactly how much money a billionaire is giving to a candidate, and how much money do you attribute to like the things that Elon Musk was doing to try to advance Trump's campaign. Like, what dollar amount do you put on that? What dollar amount do you put on Russian bots assisting spreading narratives to hurt the Democratic Party and elevate Trump in the 2024 election? You know, it is by those metrics, the Republican Party and Donald Trump spent way more money than the Harris campaign. New Jersey Stephanie says, do we need a complete overhaul of government and elect progressives who won't go to Congress to get money? New Jersey Stephanie, we don't need a complete overhaul to elect progressives, to the government. We just have to vote in the primary. We just have to vote for progressives in the primary, and we have to convince other people to vote for progressives in the primary. Because if there's a progressive Democrat and a more centrist Democrat in the primary, and the centrist wins, that is not evidence of political corruption. That is just more people voted for the centrist than the progressive. More people thought that it was a safer bet to vote for the centrist, or they like the centrist better, you know? And so there's this image, there's this idea that has been circulating on the internet that politicians have to align with this 100%, or they're completely fucking full of shit, when better is better and worse is worse, you know? All right, Kale says, what are your thoughts on the Democratic Party for 2028? Any candidates you want to see run? I always punt on this question, Kale, because I do not believe in wish casting for the 28 election when we got the midterms coming up in 2026. Kyle Lee says, thoughts on gerrymandering? Gerrymandering is toxic to our democracy. The Democratic Party tried to make gerrymandering illegal during Biden's administration, but the Republican senators refused to allow the Democrats to even vote on it. They filibustered every attempt that the Democrats had to vote on it. So, you know, if you don't like gerrymandering, you should vote for Democrats. Let's see here. It's All Theater says, what sources do you use for the dark money amounts? There is an economist who I trust on these issues named Robert Reich. I believe you spell his last name Reich. And he has some very substantive breakdowns of the political spending and political donations in the 2024 elections. So I would recommend checking out Robert Reich. Lucy says, how are politicians able to straight out lie under oath or not? It has to do with the people who would enforce the laws that say that they're not allowed to, you know, because the Supreme Court is so thoroughly in bed with the Republican Party, Republican politicians and Republican-aligned individuals who are lying under oath know that they have cover in the Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court will either go to bat for them or delay the case until it is no longer salient. Oplavis says, what's your opinion on anarchism? I guess it depends on how you define anarchism. I think that if you dismantle the government and just sort of like let people do whatever they want, things tend to go poorly for marginalized communities and poor people, and so I'm not in favor of that. Alrighty. Tim says, redistrict midstream? Yeah, don't care for that whatsoever. Plu Nasty says, why does America give so much to Israel? Because politicians are heavily influenced by money in politics, thanks to conservative policies like Citizens United. And so now any organization that has a lot of money can put a lot of influence on politicians by funding their campaigns or funding their challengers in the primary. We've seen this with AIPAC, and AIPAC is the lobbying organization that pushes the interests of the Israeli government and convinces American politicians to vote to continue sending money and weapons to them, even though they have been found guilty of doing war crimes and genocide. Alrighty, Canadian Nationalist says, what's your opinion on Texas requiring Texans to pledge allegiance to Israel to receive aid? I think it's fucking bullshit. That's America first. Like, we are taking away American citizens' rights to boycott and protest. Everybody's free speech rights are in the gutter if it has anything to do with Israel. And now, if there's a fucking flood in your town, and you know your neighbor decided that they wanted to boycott Israel, then they're not going to send any disaster relief to your state. Doesn't seem very America first to me. Right, Lindsay Reed says, thoughts on Texas Democrat badasses. I'm happy when Democrats fight. You know, I'm happy when they fight, and I like seeing the Texas Democrats doing what they can to fight, to be part of the solution. Lobotomy Photography says, Zoran, yeah, I like him. Tim says, why does Trump ignore the Constitution? Because the Constitution does not help him to become a fascist dictator. And, there's nobody that is going to hold him accountable for ignoring the Constitution. So he does it because he wants to and he can. And, we should vote for people to hold him accountable. You know, maybe if we elect enough Democrats in the midterms, then we can actually hold Trump accountable for all the fucking shit that he's been doing. All right. Foo Silverworld says, what are your thoughts on people what don't pick either side but try remaining neutral? I understand why a person might, believe that being neutral or being independent or being centrist, being a both sides person is the move. Because I get it, The problem is that they have bought a type of propaganda that tells them that the way to be a free thinker, the way to be the kind of person who isn't captured by either side, the way that we can prove to the world that you're smarter than everybody else is by saying things like, both sides are the same, or I'm an independent, I don't really buy into either side. Like they give them this idea of you get to be so much higher on the intellectual ladder than everybody else because you see through the game of politics, where there's good things on both sides and both parties are basically the same and shit like that, So, I believe in practicing radical empathy for every voter because, depending on where you grew up or what your family's like or what your social media propaganda is pumping into your noodle, anybody could be convinced of anything potentially. And so I'm not going to throw shades on those people, but they have bought propaganda. They have bought a con, and they are being lied to. Squidball says, what a biased conversation. It's not biased, Squidball. If you ask a question, then I'll answer it. Jacob Varsa says, we are being ruled by the minority. Our government is rigged for Republicans, 2 senators per state. That is accurate. Jeffrey Shelton says, anarchism traditionally has been very organized. I've never seen it. Timothy Chalamet, good to see you again. Carmine says, can you summarize the Constitution's terms and conditions if you're not white? I don't know if I can get into that, Carmine, right now. Matthew Villages says, which party is the worst in your opinion? Republicans by a lot. Tim says, will we stop Trump? We will if people do the work to stop Trump. If we all just sit around and watch the news and scroll social media and just hope and pray that somebody swoops in and stops the Trump fucking train from happening, then we will not stop Trump. But if people like you and me do the work of stopping Trump, then we will stop Trump. Mia's LV Adventure says, what is going on with the gerrymandering in Texas? So Texas called a special session, but they can't do that unless they have a quorum, meaning they have to have a certain number of elected officials there. Currently, there are enough Democrats that if they just leave the state, they can't hold their special session because they can't do a quorum. And so long as all those elected Texas Democrats are in Illinois, then the plan to jerry rig Texas to steal the 2026 election is stalled. And so yeah, we're just kind of like we're in a wait and see kind of situation. Matthew Barkley says, "Would you rather Kamala in office than Trump?" I would rather see almost anybody in office than Trump, but 100% Kamala Harris. She was a great candidate. KL says, "Is Trump's mess reversible?" 100%. And do you think it will take years to fix the damage? It will take years, KL, but the more people like me and you that do the work, the quicker that the damage will be undone. And I'm just seeing all these gifts that I'm getting right now, guys. I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you to Pink Low. Thank you to Lindsay Reed. Thank you to Carmine. Much appreciate you guys being here. Stephanie says Kamala was a great candidate. Yeah, I didn't see any real problems with Kamala. She was not my first choice. She was a little bit more of a centrist. She had a little bit of trouble getting on her feet, I think, mostly because they only gave her 107 days to mount her campaign. But yeah, I found a lot of the criticism of Kamala Harris and her campaign to be pretty unfair and hyperbolic. Right. Tiger Kington says, "What's the path to normalcy in politics? People like you and me doing the work, Tiger Kington. People like me and you doing the work, making people realize that the internet is the Wild West and that we should be more engaged in politics and not believe propaganda and shit like that." Stephanie says, "Yep, they gave her the campaign." I don't know what you mean by... Well, I don't know what that means, Stephanie. I don't know what point you're trying to make here. It's the Rocketeer. Good to see you again. To quote Philip DeFranco, for that neutral person, "You may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you." That is 1,000% accurate. Op Levis says, "What is Party 2025 really about? I heard like Democrats as disabling checks and balances to allow for dictatorship, while Republicans are better representing the voting results by only having loyalists, by removing individuals who were unelected." Oplivis, I can't really tell what question you're asking because it seems kind of muddled. What is Project 2025 really about? I heard something like Democrats as disabling checks and balances to allow for dictatorship. So yes, Project 2025 is currently the Republicans' attempt to dismantle checks and balances so that Trump can have a dictatorship. That is 100% accurate. And Republicans represented as only having loyalists by removing individuals who are unelected. No, it's called consolidating power, and it's part of the dictator fascist playbook, where you eliminate people who are there to do their jobs, and you put in people who will do what the dictator tells them to do. If your job is collecting garbage, and you collect garbage from everybody's house, whether they voted for you or your opponents, if they voted for Democrats or Republicans, you pick up everybody's trash. And so you get fired for doing that, and instead they put in somebody who only picks up trash from Republican houses and leaves the trash to rot on the lawns of Democratic voters. That is what Project 2025 is. It's not, getting rid of unelected individuals because unelected individuals are worse, Alrighty. Caden says, "Do you think it's possible that left and right will reunite and come together as our country falls?" It will if we do the work, Caden. If people like me and you do the work. Matthew Barkley says, "Did you like Shane Gillis's SB monologue?" I don't love Shane Gillis. I understand that he's a extremely skilled stand-up comedian. As a stand-up comedian myself, I really don't care for the kind of like both sides team of stand-up comedy, where I'm just like, you are supposed to be fighting on behalf of the people. And one side is clearly on the side of the billionaires, and the other side is clearly on the side of the people. So what the fuck are you doing with this both sides bullshit, And as a person with as a person in an interracial relationship, it really irked me, some of the things that he joked about Asian people. And, it is fine if you forgive Shane Gillis for that, but I have not. All right. Matthew Barkley says, "Did you know Shane Gillis is a liberal himself?" I'm sure. I'm sure he is. You know, and I'm not going to throw any shade on anybody who wants to be a Shane Gillis fan, but I just can't. You know, he's irked me. There are some people who you can remove the art from the artist. You know, who are like, I'm going to really enjoy, all of Kanye West's music, even though he has said some fucking wildly anti-Semitic shit and he's fucking full-on fascist guy right now. But for some people, just knowing that about him just like ruins listening to that music. And for stand up, where it is so intimately connected to, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your breakdown of things that are going on currently. I don't know. There's so many other great comedians that I would rather spend my time, engaging with. And again, I'm sure he's an extremely talented, structurally, smart stand-up comedian. I just don't fuck with him. All right. The Kate Awakening says, "How long do Texas Dems have to stay out of Texas? Indefinitely. I think until December is when it would be too late to gerrymander, to redraw the districts for it to affect the 2026 midterms. So potentially they just have to stay until December, and that's it." All right, Lauren, good to see you again. C Breezy says libertarian is greater than Republicans and Democrats. Fully disagree. Libertarians, everywhere they tried libertarianism, those towns have gotten taken over by bears. Dad says Trump administration is removing sections of the Constitution on the government website. Yeah, that should be concerning for everybody. Carmine says, "What's a long way to say go do that shit over there?" I like to say take that attitude to a different latitude. C Breezy says Argentina. Okay. I don't know what point you're trying to make there, C Breezy. Triska Fawn says, "You don't think the Texas Democrats leaving is just a delay tactic?" I mean, if they delay until December, then then it was a successful maneuver. Alrighty, Caden says, "I understand we got to protect Israel, but for them to take us for advantage to commit crimes, hell no." Completely agree with you, Caden. Marie, good afternoon to you as well. Oplevis says, "Is the threat real or is it just news sensationalism and exaggeration? Does Trump have the power and show the trends to actually do that? And would it be a dictatorship or an oligarchy? Still democratic, roughly. I am not from the U.S." So Oplevis, the threat is 100% real. The people in Trump's orbit that were saying, "Oh, we're not going to do Project 2025 if we get elected," immediately after the election, they all admitted, like, "Yeah, we're 100% doing Project 2025. In the 6-7 months that Trump has been president, he has accomplished about half of Project 2025 already. So 100%, the threat is real. It is a dictatorship. It is an oligarchy. It is a kleptocracy. It is a plutocracy. It is all of those things at the same time. Kanan says 6 minus 7, -1. Flip says lies. That's not a question, Flip. So guess what? You're out of here. Welcome everybody to the live stream. Ask me anything about politics. Ginger Man says, "What do you think of Buttigieg?" I like Buttigieg. He's much more of a centrist than I prefer. It also seems like he may have lost his fastball a little bit. Like he used to have the best messaging in the Democratic Party, but I don't know. It seems like he's been kind of off basis, lately. But yeah, I think that representation is really important, and so I appreciate politicians who are part of marginalized groups the way that Buttigieg is part of the LGBTQ community. I also am in favor of generational change in politics, so I appreciate that he's a younger politician as well. Marie says, "How long before Trump turns on Congress?" I mean, Congress is doing what he wants, Marie, and so there's no real necessity to him turning on Congress, the institution, because they're letting him get away with all of this. He'll turn on individual elected representatives in Congress, but yeah, he is he's dog walking Congress, so yeah, why would he why would he need to go after them? Average Joe says, "Isn't Argentina where all the Nazis fled after World War II?" I believe that's potentially accurate. Alrighty, let's see here. Ash2244 says, "What do you think about trans women?" I feel the same way about trans women that I feel about natural born women, that I feel about trans men, as I feel about natural born men, where they're all people, and they deserve equal rights, and they should be allowed to just live their fucking life. Donald Dixon says, any chance AOC could win a national election? I think so. Grim Reality says, what do you think about the UAP NHI phenomenon? Is that the spaceships, Grim Reality, the flying saucers? Is that what you're referring to with the UAPs? Unidentified aerial phenomenons. I don't know what NHI stands for. BS2 says, is Trump an ill-intentioned, sociopathic, traitorous, criminal con with an ignorant cult following? Yes. BS2. Easiest question I've answered all day. Solicitous Crumb says, I just shared an old article from Wired magazine. What's the title of the piece, Solicitous Crumb? Boss says, what do you think about the Israeli lobby that controls the country? The Israeli lobby doesn't control the country. They have a lot of influence over the country because the ground is littered with the bodies of politicians that have tried to stand up to AIPAC. So sometimes politicians, even ones that are operating in good faith and do believe in trying to curb some of Israel's influence over America's government, they will still sometimes toe the party line or do a word salad when asked certain questions because they don't want AIPAC to come after them as well. Solicitous Scrum says, does this thing even work? Are you hearing me? Yes, I am. All right, scrolling down the bottom of the TikTok comments. Freedom versus Fascist says, you don't think centrist is the way for Dems to go? Get independents and traditional Republicans. So depending on who you ask, Freedom versus Fascists, being too centrist is the reason why Democrats lost in 2024. And depending on who you ask, being too progressive is the reason why they lost in 2024. I call the Democratic Party Schrodinger's political party because they are simultaneously too far to the left and too far to the right and doing too much and doing too little. I say let the Democratic Party be a big tent that has centrists and progressives and all different kinds of caucuses, the Black American group and the LGBTQ group and the Mexican American group and the Jewish coalition and the female coalition and the working class coalition, the strength of the Democratic Party is in its diversity, but that does make it unwieldy and it makes us really susceptible to infighting that especially can be fueled by, propaganda on the internet convincing us that it is more important to fight amongst ourselves than to fight the billionaire class or the Republican Party that is working with the billionaire class. Alrighty, Iksenji says, I think, though, a lot of registered Dems did stay home, and that made a big impact. 100%, but why did they? Iksenji, did they stay home because they believed that Kamala Harris was too extreme? Did they stay home because they thought that she was too much like a Republican? Did they believe that the Democratic Party was not doing enough to stop the genocide in Gaza? Did they believe that Democrats didn't do enough to bring down cost of living? There is a massive amount of motivations for somebody being disenchanted by the political process and deciding to stay home. But all of it, especially if you're a Democratic voter that understands the damage of the Republican Party, is bullshit. It's the Rocketeer says, have we ever considered just becoming billionaires, though? Yeah, I guess if everybody was a billionaire, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Yeah, let's do that. Let's have every American be a billionaire. Kia Girl, I remember you. Now I pronounced your name correctly. Donald Dixon says, Harris was a horrible candidate. I disagree. Kia Girl says, do you notice that it is usually women who have called out the settings being done by the GOP? I do believe that women are better in this space, but I'm not really sure if there's a specific thing that you were referring to, Kia Girl. Gennaro says, why do Democrats insist on being on the 20% side? They're not, Gennaro. The Democratic platform is more popular than the Republican platform by a factor of like 70 to 30. And the reason why people still vote for Republicans or don't vote at all is because they are buying into propaganda and misinformation that tells them that the Democratic Party is worse than it actually is, and the Republican Party is better than it actually is. Or they just tell them not to vote, and so lots of people don't vote. But yeah, there's a ton of evidence where, even in the reddest states, if you put things that are in the Democratic platform in a ballot initiative, it will win, usually by a factor of like 70 to 30. All right. Donald Dixon says, yes, she was 2016 presidential primaries. She wasn't in the presidential primary in 2016, Donald Dixon. Logan Mayhew says, do you think we will ever realistically get a moderate president? We've had lots of moderate presidents. Triska Found says, do you believe we should move to modernize our government similar to Germany and other European countries? Absolutely. Brandon says Republican culture wars is all they have. That is accurate. Carmine says thoughts on Bush Jr.'s campaign. I mean, are you talking about W. Bush, or is there a new Bush on the scene that I should be angry about? Peanut says, if you could change America in any way, what would you do first? That's a really good question. I don't know. There's a whole fucking laundry list. I guess just make being a billionaire illegal. I think that's probably my number one. John Gutierrez says, "Do members of the bar relinquish citizenship?" I don't believe so. If you're a lawyer, you know, you don't have to be. You can still be a citizen of America if you're a lawyer. Solicitus Crumb says, "I'm going to keep sending that link till you speak about it." I'm not seeing any links, Solicitus Crumb. I also don't click on links from people that I don't know. So if you just tell me what the article's about, maybe we could just talk about it that way. Gardy Lehmanmeister says, "Do you think Bernie would have won in 2016?" Oh, that's a really good question. So, oy, yeah, that's a really good question. I personally do believe that Bernie would have won in 2016. But that's 100% speculation, you know, where Hillary Clinton was torpedoed by decades of Republican, you know, smear campaigns, by billions of dollars of Russian propaganda being spread on social media before we even knew that we needed to worry about that sort of thing, you know. If that machine had been turned to Bernie Sanders instead, Bernie Sanders, who proudly, you know, wears the badge of democratic socialist, and the way that fear mongering the word socialism is so dug into American psyches, you know, like I think it's very possible that somebody like Bernie could have been taken down by that stuff, you know. But you know, I was a Bernie guy in 2016 and in 2020. After I was a Warren guy. After Warren dropped out, I was a Bernie guy. Yeah, I do think so, just because there's so many Trump voters who their number one choice was Bernie Sanders and their second choice was Trump. Yeah, you know, I think he probably could have squeezed it out. BS2 says, "Is the answer to that one thing question deport all MAGA zombies?" You know, as productive as that might be for our American politics, I believe in radical empathy for voters. And if you have rage and frustration that you want to vent, I say direct it at Republican politicians, at right-wing talking heads like who are completely full of shit, like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and Benny Johnson, and at the billionaire class who is enabling them. Ghost Rider says, thoughts on Trump's job so far in this term? The worst grade that you can give somebody, an F minus. Mercy 870 says, why do you think there was such a pipeline between Bernie and Trump voters back then? I think that part of that was that Russian bots were instructed to only go after Hillary Clinton and to elevate Trump and Bernie as candidates. I also think that Bernie Sanders was speaking to the exact economic instability that supposedly elected, you know, Trump. You know, he was a populist socialist candidate. Additionally, there is a lot of polling evidence, though, you know, I'm not really the expert to get into those details, to suggest that what people want is change. They want different, they want outsider, and Trump and Bernie represented both of those things, even though, you know, Trump was obviously a liar. And so anybody with, you know, what do you call it? Anybody with enough wherewithal to see a con man when they're conning would have had their preferences be Bernie and then Hillary. Alrighty, let's see here. Phones were tracked from Epstein's Island article, Wired Magazine. Google it. Okay, so this is Chrome. Was that so fucking hard? Did you need to put it in all caps? You know. All right. Let's see here. Okay. SHM420 says, do you like toes in politics? What the hell does that mean? Hablo says, what do you think of America giving aid to the Blue Star country? What's the Blue Star country? J.A. Doug says, why would you stop somebody from making $1 billion? Because the act of having $1 billion hurts everybody else. Official Not Brian says, would you debate Charlie Kirk? I would, but not because I think that there's any winning a debate. Debates are stupid. They're unproductive. It is just two people trying to use debate tactics to own or win in specific moments. And, no matter what happens in a debate, each person in the debate gets to clip it and say that they won the debate. Charlie Kirk does not actually engage in the facts. He has memorized a bunch of talking points and cherry picked a bunch of data to make it seem like he is not 100% full of shit. He knows he's a liar. He knows that he is tricking people. He knows that this is how he becomes a rich and successful and famous person. So that is what he is doing. But I still would do it because I would relish the opportunity to tell him that to his face. Kyle Malone says, you'd get destroyed. No, I wouldn't. Solstice Crumb says, I gave you the secret. Your programming has denied yourself the truth. Need to break yourself out. Okay, Solstice Crumb, can we dial it down a little bit, ma'am? Let me, pump the brakes, all right? Alrighty. Tapatio says, is Mark Cuban a better version of Donald Trump? Yeah, I mean, every billionaire is better than Donald Trump, Yeah, but no billionaire is good. Just the act of having $1 billion is immoral. Dylan says, thoughts on the Sydney Sweeney ad? I don't really give a shit. I think that Sydney Sweeney herself has proven to have some pretty intimate ties to the right wing, and I do not believe in supporting anybody who should know better and is falling for Republican bullshit and MAGA lies. And so if you want to argue about whether American Eagle did that on purpose or not, you can. I just don't think it's productive or what do you call it? I don't think it's productive. Let's see here. Phantom says, cry about it. Your mom cried last night when I broke up with her. Angela says, the Democratic Party is laughing at you, believing it's lies. Why steals your tax dollars? The Democratic Party doesn't steal tax dollars. The Republican Party is currently stealing your tax dollars and putting it into the pockets of the billionaire class. Phantom says, sobbing on the mic, ATM. Your mom sobbed on my dick last night, trying to convince me not to break up with her. Congratulations, Phantom. You are out of here. Phantom says, I'm surprised you're not more interested in my dad. Well, sorry, but fellas just don't do it for me. Just your mom. Casper says, JD Vance is a huge pushover. Just saying. Accurate. Angela says, the Democratic Party is laughing at you because they have you brainwashed. That is inaccurate, Angela, and also that is not a question. Let's see here. Wind and Leaf says, why are Democrats so corrupt? Democrats are way less corrupt on the net than the Republican Party. The Republican Party's platform is enabling corruption, so it is weird that you would call Democrats corrupt when it's the Republican parties. Lagoon Wetland says, are we working today? I work every day. I work it. Tesa says, tell me how Republicans hate blue states, yet don't understand that red states need them. It's just part of the culture war. It is saying your enemy is Democrats, Democratic voters, Democratic politicians. Your enemy is reporters and scientists and colleges. It is trans kids. It is immigrants and poor people and black people, so that they do not recognize that the billionaires are robbing them blind. Thistle Soup says, agree with everything you say. Thank you, Thistle. Collins says, I'm pretty sure the parties at one point in time switched what they stood for. That is accurate. The Republic, as far as I know about American history, what they switched was just their stance on civil rights, where the Republican Party has always been more business and billionaire friendly than the Democratic Party. But at one point, the Democratic Party was much more in line with, racist establishments like the KKK. And Colin, I'm with you 100%. Josh says, do you like Wednesdays? I don't really eat fast food. Burr Newbie says, do you prefer quesadillas or flip-flops? I don't really have a preference between footwear and Mexican dinner items. Joe Diaz says, let's see here. Joe Diaz says, is I supporting people who are permanent residents and pay taxes? Yes. 100%, Joe Diaz. They are deporting people. They are sending them to concentration camps, both here and abroad. They're sending them to fucking alligator Auschwitz for no fucking good reason. Irish Page says, why don't MAGA find Donnie weird? Because the propaganda and misinformation is a hell of a drug. Chip Level says, who will be the Democratic nominee in 2028? I always punt on that question because I'm not trying to wishcast 28. I'm trying to keep people focused on 26. The midterms in 26. Democrats need to fucking run the table in 26. Let's unelect every single fucking Republican who is letting this bullshit happen, who are fucking asleep at the wheel and not doing their job of reining in this wildly illegal and corrupt and barbaric administration. Lindsay Reed says, what's the biggest contest in 26? Ooh, that I do not know. Bet says, Yas Queen. Yas Queen back at you. Wawa says, I'm glad you called it Auschwitz because that's what it really is. Yeah, I'm trying to get that trending. People call it Alligator Alcatraz. I think Alligator Auschwitz is much more accurate, and also it's exactly as alliterative. Google account says, would you support Jon Stewart as a presidential Democratic nominee? Smoke 14 fan says, love your tears. I loved your mom's tears on my dick last night. It was an excellent lubricant. Would I support Jon Stewart? I don't know if he would be my first choice. I don't love incentivizing entertainers to go into politics the way that Donald Trump was an entertainer who went into politics. You know, I believe that we should be valuing some level of government experience before we start running for president. Where people are saying like AOC should run for president, I'm like, AOC should take Chuck Schumer's seat. You know, if she wants to run for president, that's great. She would be one of my top choices, I think. Maybe not my number one, but she's definitely up there. And Jon Stewart, I think, is great. You know, I've been a fan of his for a really fucking long time. And if he won the primary, I would go to work for that campaign. You know, I would wear the soles off of the bottom of my shoes, knocking on people's doors for Jon Stewart to win. Average Joe says, if the right, great to see you again, Average Joe. If the right keeps moving to the right, then trying to be a lefty centrist will eventually put you on the political right. Isn't it more beneficial for Dems to just plant their ethical flag, so to speak, so voters don't have to vote for a Liz Cheney to oppose MAGA? I completely agree with you, Average Joe. I think that you need to stand by your principles. At a certain point, compromising with a party that is becoming more and more extreme, it betrays your own values and it does not do any service. It is, you're losing, you're negotiating against yourself, But you bring up the Liz Cheney thing, and I don't know if you've heard me do this rant yet, Average Joe PG, but I think that the Liz Cheney thing, where Kamala Harris is concerned, is one of the most instructive examples of how our information environment is weaponized against the Democratic Party. Because if you were paying attention, and if you saw the things that Liz Cheney was saying and the Democratic coalitions were saying about why Liz Cheney was campaigning with Kamala Harris, it was that we are trying to show how bad Donald Trump is, that even Liz Cheney is urging people to vote for Kamala Harris. And if you like Liz Cheney, you should vote for Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is just that bad. But that got chewed up and rephrased and spit out into Kamala Harris is exactly the same as Liz Cheney. Kamala Harris is just Republican light. Kamala Harris loves war criminals like the Cheneys. The Democratic Party is the same as the Republican Party. Kamala Harris is betraying the progressive left. She's betraying her base. She is going to run as she's campaigning as a Republican. She's going to run as a Republican, and that was decidedly not why that was happening. So there you go. Alrighty, let's see here. Taysa says, so yeah, more to your point, Average Joe. People voting for Kamala Harris weren't voting for Liz Cheney. Kamala Harris was not a Liz Cheney, but even the way that you phrase that proves to me that some of that propaganda works. Not on you. You're a very smart guy, but I'm just saying. All right, Taysa says, how do we live with MAGA cult around us? We need to do the work of deprogramming people. And deprogramming MAGA is difficult, so don't worry about that. First, deprogram a centrist. Deprogram a right-wing centrist. Deprogram a non-voter. And then, suddenly we have more people with us to help in the process of deprogramming MAGA. All right, Moses Noses says, I tend to be a cynic. Are you feeling hopeful? I was hopeful in September and got burned. I completely sympathize, Moses Noses, but here is the number one point that keeps me from being cynical and from being pessimistic, which is that all the worst people, the billionaire class, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all the fucking Republican politicians and Republican talking heads that are working with the billionaire class to turn us into the fucking new serfdom, a bunch of wage slavers while they get to fucking fly around on private jets eating lobster and caviar 3 meals a day. They want us to be cynical. They want us to be pessimistic. They want us to give up. And so regardless of how bad things get, regardless of how much work we have to do, I refuse to give them that gift of my cynicism. I refuse to give them my pessimism. And instead, I am going to shove my optimism and my not giving up into their weird fucking dork ass faces. As they're so desperate for you to believe that resistance is futile. And so I say fucking refuse, you know? Be part of the Hope Coalition. Be part of the Hope Resistance, I say. Alrighty, let's see here. Steve Berlim says, how to become a politician, run for office. Right. Gavin Gardner says, this is not how you unite a nation. This is exactly how you unite a nation. Smoke 14 fan says, hope, love the left trying to figure it out. All right, ask a question, Smoke, or you're out of here. Average Joe says, I was paying attention. I recognize propaganda fairly easily. Harris campaigning with Cheney didn't convince to not vote Dem. However, don't you feel that it shows capitulation to consultants rather than appealing to their base? I don't, Average Joe, because what Kamala Harris was saying and what Liz Cheney were saying was, we do not agree with each other. We have policies that are wildly different, and electing Kamala Harris does not mean that you are electing a compromised candidate, you know, where she's going to take the Liz Cheney agenda and mix it with the Kamala Harris agenda. The only thing that they were saying was that this is just evidence of how bad Trump is. That even somebody as conservative as Liz Cheney, who disagrees with everything that Kamala Harris stands for, is still saying it is better to elect Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is that bad and is that dangerous. So yeah, I don't see that as capitulation at all. I thought, and in polling, that was an extremely powerful message to centrists and Trump skeptical Republicans. You know, yeah, but that's not the message that people took away, you know, because that is what the billionaire class wanted to spread over social media, was anything to poke holes in Democratic enthusiasm and voter turnout. Alrighty. Smoke 14 fan says Liz Cheney isn't conservative. Liz Cheney is extremely conservative. Smoke 14 says, what would have made Kamala better? So many things. Kamala wouldn't have had a crypto coin where she was accepting illegal donations from adversarial nations. She would not be deporting people who are legal residents who haven't done any fucking crimes. She would not be tripling ICE's budget and creating concentration camps or shipping people off to a concentration camp in fucking El Salvador and South Sudan and shit like that. So yeah. Gavin Gardner says, your language is divisive. This is not how you unite a nation. I mean, that's according to you, Gavin, but ask a question because I'm tired of you just telling me that I'm doing my job wrong. DTM says, why do we consistently elect the worst of us? The reason, DTM, is because people don't vote. We don't consistently elect the worst of us. The voters do. And, you know, there are more non-voters in this country than there are voters. So if people voted, then potentially we would elect the best of us instead. And I think that, you know, obviously money and propaganda and misinformation are, you know, are destructive elements to politics and convince people to vote for people who are not, you know, good people. You know, there you go. Lots of reasons. B75 says she would not have pardoned criminals. That is 100. She would not be selling pardons. Also, she would not have moved Ghislaine Maxwell from a maximum security facility for violent offenders to a minimum security facility in exchange for her saying that she never saw Trump do anything weird with Jeffrey Epstein, you know? It's the Rocketeer says, speaking of stifling the vote, has anyone heard from Jill Stein and how she's doing the work? No, weirdly. I'm sure she's probably in Moscow right now or some shit like that. Marcy says, people don't vote because neither party does anything for the working class, people losing hope. That's not true, Marcy. The Democratic Party does a lot of work for the working class. And the fact that people believe that the Democratic Party doesn't do that and that you don't believe that the Democratic Party does anything for the working class means that propaganda is working on you too. Brendan says, will we ever get the files? We'll get the files once the FBI is done. Once the 1,000 FBI agents are done redacting Donald Trump's name from all those files. And they're going to probably write in Bill Clinton's name and George Soros' name a whole bunch of times. Then they'll release it once they are no longer accurate. Alrighty. Beef says, "What the hell is up with Spotify and YouTube now requiring uploading IDs?" I believe it's part of like a move to try to keep sensitive information away from minors, but yeah, I don't agree with that policy, and but I also haven't delved into it a whole bunch. User a bunch of number says, "Was Trump Epstein's partner?" I mean, they were really good friends for a long time, so take what you will from that. Smoke 14 says, "All to doubt when truth comes out." Salido says they have to cover up Israeli involvement with Epstein. I don't know if Epstein was Mossad. He might have been working with Mossad. He might have been working with, fucking MI5 and, the fucking KGB, Right. Smoke 14 says, "Fan, there's the propaganda they want you to believe about the files." I don't know what you are referring to there. Triska says, "Will Trump be removed from office or will he have to go the whole term?" The only way that Trump is getting removed from office is if, number one, he dies, or number two, if Democrats win every single Senate seat and take over the House. That is the only way he's getting removed from office. The Republican Party is fully capitulating to Donald Trump, regardless of how many laws he breaks and how damaging he is to the country and world. They will do his bidding. So without Democrats running the table in the midterms and getting 67 seats in the Senate, Donald Trump, he'll get impeached if Democrats take the House, but he will not be voted to be removed from office by the Senate. All right, Sato says his handler Maxwell was the daughter of a high-profile Mossad agent. All of the evidence that Ghislaine's Maxwell's dad was in Mossad is kind of thin, in my opinion. Cole Vickery says, "Please speak on the Indiana gerrymandering plan by Vance." Oh, I haven't even heard about Indiana also planning on doing some mid-decade gerrymandering bullshit. That's fucked up. Camp Dracula says, "Why does my tummy hurt? Have you drank any water today?" Gavin Gardner says, "Are you a Democrat?" Yes, I am. S.E. Morgan says, "The reason the GOP is backing tariffs is it taxes the poor the same as the wealthy." That is accurate. Google account says, "Who was a worse PDF file, Clinton or Trump?" I'm gonna say Trump just because there are over 24 women who have accused him of rape, and at least one of them said that she was 13 years old at the time. And I have not heard the same thing about Bill. I know that there are a bunch of very sketchy things that Bill has done, and I know that there's a lot of evidence tying him to Epstein. But if you're asking me which one is worse, I'm gonna go Trump. Because there's no quotes of Bill saying that he wishes that he could sleep with, his daughter Chelsea Clinton, whereas Trump, has said a whole bunch of times like, if you weren't my daughter, I'd be dating you. And is it wrong that I'm more attracted to my 13-year-old daughter than my wife? Shit like that. Marcy says, "Why hasn't the federal minimum wage been increased when both parties have had the majority?" So the Democrats tried to raise the minimum wage, but the Republicans filibustered it. Marcy, is that your only evidence that both parties are the same? Because if one party tries to raise the minimum wage and the other party blocks it, then that's clearly one party trying to do the right thing for the working class and the other party stopping them, right, Marcy? All right, Pink Love, thank you for being here. Appreciate that. S.E. Morgan says, "Bill is mostly a threat to middle-aged women." Yeah, probably. I don't know. Moderate says, "Raising the minimum wage is evil." I completely disagree. Luke says, "If raising the minimum wage solves the problem, why not raise it to $100? That's a little hyperbolic, Luke. But it's a little bit like saying, if 25 milligrams of penicillin will cure my infection, why don't I take 1,000 milligrams of penicillin? Well, because scale matters, I guess. Luke, are you trying to prove a point, Luke, or are you actually, do you actually believe that that is the analogy that you want to go with? Irish Page says, "Bad analogy." I know. I think what you said was bad, Luke. Irish Page says, "Any thoughts on Ford losing millions due to Trump's tariffs?" I mean, every company is going to be losing. Every American citizen is going to be losing. Moderate says, "Raising the minimum wage puts people out of work." That is billionaire propaganda, moderates, and you fell for it. I'm sorry, buddy. Average Joe says, "I feel that we actually agree. Let me try to reword. Do you think it showed a level of unawareness on Harris's part regarding what the voters want? Like, how did she not see that it would push the base away when I feel like she was misled by the party. Average Joe, you know that I got nothing but love for you, man. So I'm not casting aspersions whatsoever about your, you being, a savvy voter and interpreter of political information. Uh-oh, my live was taken off of TikTok. Well, that's fine. I can spend some more time with you, Average Joe. All right. Yeah, this is just a thing that the right wing likes to do to me sometimes to try to kick me off of TikTok. Is they will report me for misinformation, even though I have done no misinformation. Okay, so um, I hear what you're saying in doing this stunt of campaigning with Liz Cheney. Um, Kamala Harris is, it could be interpreted, and again, this is not what Liz Cheney or Kamala Harris or any Democrat said. It was just the narrative from adversarial actors trying to torpedo her campaign that said this, And personally, I think it was wrong that was the narrative. I disagree with that narrative, but that narrative is out there. Does that mean that was a mistake on Kamala Harris's part? There are exactly as many people who believe that the reason why Democrats lose elections is because they are too progressive, as there are people that think that the reason why Democrats lose is because they're too centrist. So there's not one right answer there. And if she had only campaigned with Bernie Sanders and AOC and then lost the election, then everybody would be talking about how she should have been campaigning with people like Liz Cheney. So yeah, I don't think it showed a level of unawareness. And I think I mentioned this already, that the number one message in polling for what is it? For undecided voters was that establishment Republicans, were all saying to vote for Harris because of how dangerous and unqualified and unstable Donald Trump was. So if the polling is pushing you in that direction and the messaging is on point, why is it that Democrats are responsible for how bad faith actors are reinterpreting maliciously the things that you are saying and doing? This is the reason why I give Democrats a wide berth for the mistakes that they made, is because they get yelled at no matter what they do, and they say something, and then the internet takes it and jumbles it up and says, "Are you saying this?" And Democrats go, "No," and they go, "Everybody, the Democrats are saying this bad thing instead of that good thing that they said they were saying." So yeah, I don't buy this argument one tick, because no matter what Democrats do, they get yelled at, they get told that it's the wrong thing, and then they have to equivocate and do word salad, and it just, yeah, like I'm tired of letting the right wing win by buying into their narratives about why all the various reasons that Democrats are wrong. And all these various reasons, they're contradictory. Also, depending on what propaganda you will believe, they will tailor that narrative to you. If you're a progressive, they'll tell you that the Democratic Party is too centrist. If you're a centrist, they'll tell you the Democratic Party is too progressive. So yeah, oh no, I'm having a little. In addition to my what do you call it? To being reported on TikTok, I'm also now having some connection issues, and I gotta fucking figure this shit out. Alrighty, let's see here. So yeah, let me know what you think about that. Average Joe PG says, because Walz's weird message stopped around the same time Harris started becoming buddies with Cheney. I don't think that's accurate. People were talking about weird for a while. In fact, I also heard people saying that we were overdoing the weird thing as well. So there's no there's no right answer to Democratic messaging, because no matter what they do, people yell at them and say that that's the wrong thing. But I don't mind disagreeing with you on this, Average Joe PG. It's fine if we have this as a place where we can pleasantly, respectfully disagree with each other. But just, yeah, I see this everywhere where the Democratic Party is concerned, where they do a good thing and then people lie about the thing that they are doing. They say a good thing, then people lie about the good thing that they said. And then, sometimes they do things that are bad. And then those bad things get like so overhyped, and the fact that the Republican Party also does that bad thing or does it worse even is completely ignored. And then we gotta punish the Democratic Party for doing that bad thing by electing Republicans who are going to do that bad thing but worse. Do you see what I'm getting at here, Average Joe? Alrighty, let's see what we got over here. It's the Rocketeer says they'll just do find and replace on the list to swap Clinton for Trump, but forgot to change the description, so Bill will have messy blonde hair and lobster dick. Tyro Pillar, good to see you again, says the Dems are the step parent that can't discipline their stepkid because of that one time the biological parent got mad. Yeah, no lies detected there. Oh, I'm at an hour and 10 already, so I'm not going to try to get back on TikTok at this point. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here over in Twitch and YouTube world. Thank you for being a part of the movement of the crusade. I hope you'll join the Discord and tell all your friends how great the live stream is, and I hope that y'all have a great Wednesday. I love interacting with you, Average Joe and Tyro, and It's the Rocketeer, and Plentiful Broods Gay Af is trying to get me to buy cheap viewers on stream chat, and Oblas, thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate you guys. So yeah, don't be shy. Reach out if you like. I did see your email, Average Joe PG. Do the work as outlined in the Discord, and have a great Wednesday. I will see you guys tomorrow. Same.